Hey, Joseph.
Hi, y'all. How are ya?
Get excited?
Very.
Yeah.
Very.
I know, because we plan it, it takes so long to plan,
He's
right?
talking to people who are here.
Okay, that's fine.
Right. No, I get it. I think that's fair. And it's the kind of thing you look forward to, you make plans for, then you find an opportunity, you commit to it, but still it's so many months away. And then now it's honest. Yeah. Right. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's very close. All right, beloved,
We have a
those,
couple minutes.
Angela is suggesting I wait a couple minutes. Oh, it is just 6:29. We will wait a couple minutes for the the other Zoomers to.
Linda Lamont, how are you feeling?
Well, we're better, but we're still positive. So we need prayers. We need prayers. We can get on a plane.
Surely you'll be cleared by then.
Hoping. Lamont's, in fact, he tested yesterday thinking that he was negative, but he wasn't. And I know I'm not. So
I feel a whole lot better. So
yeah, we both feel a lot better.
We're 80% well. We just hadn't gotten over the bug yet.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of us that have caught it recently.
I mean, we haven't.
Not us, not us personally,
People's.
but now I'm worried about it.
I do
And
worry
then
about it. I'm
we were
thinking
talking
about-
to the we were
Go ahead.
talking to the nurse at our doctor's office, and she's, oh yeah, you can test positive up to 90 days. And I'm going, oh no, don't tell me that. So
And I wonder at that point, we could go with that doctor's note that,
right. Nope.
I'm thinking about the week before we leave, just wearing an N95 24/7.
Yeah.
I just don't want to take a risk. Yeah, everybody that wants to talk to me is going to have to, call me, FaceTime me. 'Cause I'm
And it's
gonna
been weird because with the two of us having it, are we giving it to each other every day or whatever? So that's why we had a nice conversation with the nurse today, and she assured us we aren't. So,
Right.
so stay safe, stay healthy, everybody.
okay.
Look at that
All
camera.
right, okay, hey. I just wanted to run through a few things. Has everyone gotten your accessories? So I sent an email that had kind of some links that you could use, but you need a converter or just an adapter. Your phone will usually work with just an adapter because they run on both voltages. So make sure you get those. They also have like this that I got. So it has like the plug for Israel, and then this is a converter too, or just an adapter. So you can, do multiple things. Also, I have a scale. So we'll probably have a 15-pound limit on our luggage. So 50, sorry, I said 15.
Yeah.
Sorry, 50. Yeah. So yeah, sorry about that. So I'm bringing this. So you don't need one, but you just hold up the luggage and we can all weigh and make sure. Some people bring their big suitcase, and then if you plan on buying a lot of souvenirs, you could think about bringing like a small carry-on just for, like an empty going that way so that you could fill it coming back. Just a thought. And anybody have any questions about those kind of things? Yeah, everybody good?
Hey, Angela,
Yeah.
this is Gail. Good evening,
Yeah.
everybody. Preston's brother works for the airport, at the airport, and he said some airlines are limiting 40 pounds now.
Okay,
So we need to be sure that,
okay, we'll
Sure.
check beforehand and make sure.
based on whatever airlines we go.
Yes, So we don't know which airline. They had seats held for us, but because some of us are going out of different places, they've released those seats and will purchase on probably another flight. So we won't know until a couple weeks beforehand. And you'll get an email with all the itinerary stuff in it, and you'll get a packet in the mail with like luggage tags and those kind of things. But that's going to be right before we go. But as soon as I find out what the airline is, once they book those tickets, I'll share that with you if they don't. But
Luggage tags and name tags.
and name tags, that's right. Yeah, that you need to bring. Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
Are they gonna send us another invoice telling us that we owe an extra $125 each? I left a voicemail asking about that, if we should just go ahead and send the money in, but I didn't get a response today. I called yesterday.
Yeah, so I don't know, because they haven't sent me any email the whole time, so, which is a problem, but, so I'm not sure, but there will be, you should be able to check online.
Okay,
And he said that they were putting it on last week, so it should be there, that 125. And he told me that you just have to pay it before we leave. So, I mean, you could send a check and write the number on it and it's going to go on there, the 125. So,
As of yesterday, they didn't have anything posted on my account. It's the
Okay.
month.
I'll call. I have some other questions too. So so I'll ask about that. And then remember, those of us going to Egypt, we'll have to pay cash for that test.
and that's in addition to the 125?
It is. And it's
How
either
much do
gonna be
we-
$50 or $100.
Of US
depending
currency.
US. So we'll just pay in dollars. So, yeah, and we don't know yet. I think it's kind of ever changing over there, so. Any other questions? All right.
Hey, beloved, I'm back. That was good. Thanks, Ange. So let's start with a word of prayer. Lord, we're here again. And as the time gets closer, we just continue to give this trip over to you. Lord, we have set aside this time to travel, to experience the land. Lord, we just pray that you would sanctify the trip and us. Keep us safe, keep us healthy, give us favor with those who have authority as we move and travel. May the trip go smoothly and without trouble, but may our hearts and minds and bodies be full of the experience. In Jesus' name, amen. So if you think about discipleship, often I think we think about discipleship just in terms of knowing something. Like I want to teach my students the Bible, or when I preach, I want the folks at Oasis to kind of hear the truth about God. But really, most of Christianity is not just about knowing some idea, but Christianity is about living a life. It's a way of life. And that way of life involves not just our heads and what we think, or even our hearts and what we feel, but it involves all of us, that to live the way of Jesus Christ. So Jesus, most of his adult life, did not move around very much, right? So he didn't have to worry about airline tickets and, the luggage or electrical outlets. He didn't have a car. I mean, he didn't even have a horse or a donkey or a camel. So Jesus walked everywhere he went. And when you're walking everywhere you go, you only can go so far in any given day. And so the average human person walks at a pace of 3 miles an hour. And there's a Japanese American theologian who wrote a book called 3 Mile an Hour God. I love it. And he says that love is not abstract, that love is particular. You don't just love something, you don't just love like generally, that you love someone, you love something. And that God's love moves at a pace at 3 miles an hour because it goes at the same pace that we go. And so that walking and that knowing, and one of the greatest things, I mean, I love Israel. I love going there. I love so many parts about it. I love the Mediterranean. I love the Sea of Galilee. I love the Jordan River. I love the Jordan River Valley. I like the Jezreel. I like the Dead Sea. I'm literally in love with Jerusalem. Like if I didn't live in Lakeland, I think I'd like to live in Jerusalem. And so the places are wonderful. The history is amazing. The food and culture is fantastic. But something that I don't think you can now anticipate is that you're going to experience it with these other people. And it's going to be at a pace of life that you'll connect to them in ways that are invaluable. And I know right now, there's just a handful of us in the room. Most of us are on Zoom, and you might not feel very connected because how connected can you be when you're looking at like the Hollywood Squares approach to discipleship? But I've said it before that this is a vacation, but it's much more than a vacation. It's a pilgrimage. And a pilgrimage doesn't happen in isolation. A pilgrimage happens in community. And this is our community. And Angela and I probably are the only two people who actually know everyone. Actually, I don't know how well she knows the Rogers. So maybe I'm the only person who actually knows everyone who's going on the trip. But I can tell you as that, I don't know, that nexus point of this small community of 22 people, that it's a great group. And I couldn't have hand chosen a better crowd to travel with. And it's going to be great. So we're going to start by talking about a place called Masada. And this is our picture of it here. So, excuse me, we had said at one point that we were going to watch the movie Masada, but as it turns out, it's like a 6-hour miniseries. And we decided maybe that was too much to watch on a Tuesday night. You thought I would have remembered that from before, but so we're not going to do that. But you can see here that Masada is, or this area, it's called the Negev. It reminds me a lot of the southwestern United States. If those of you who've been out to northern New Mexico or northern Arizona, southern Utah, southern Nevada, this is what it's like. It's super rocky. You have these kind of high plains, these deep valleys. You can see just out in the distance a body of water. That's the Dead Sea. So this is far, far south, on the south end of the Dead Sea. And we're not looking directly north, we're looking kind of northeast is the orientation of our picture. And so on this kind of very tall plateau, a fortress was built by Herod the Great. And so we've talked a lot about Herod the Great. He built Caesarea Maritima. That was the seaport that had the hippodrome and the theater. And we talked about how it was a human constructed port. It wasn't a natural port that he had made. He built a lot of aqueducts. He built a palace out in the Judean hill country called Herodium, which interestingly enough is where he was buried. And we knew of that from literature. but we thought that the literature might be wrong because they never found the actual burial site until about 20 years ago. And it was discovered. And we're like, oh, look, they were right. The literature was correct. Herod was buried here. He had a palace down in Jericho, which is pretty remarkable. His most significant accomplishment was what he did to the second temple. And we talked about that, the size of the stones, the 2 cornerstones, 600 tons apiece, which dwarf the stones of the pyramids of Egypt. So he's a masterful builder. But this was also a palace / fortress / weekend getaway for Herod the Great. Now, Masada becomes an important part of Israel's history because in the first Jewish war, which was from like 66 to 70 AD, so if you think if Jesus was born roughly around 4 BC, and you might say, how could Jesus be born in 4 BC? If BC means before Christ, how could Jesus be born then? Well, we got the calendar a little off in the Middle Ages, so we'll say Jesus was born roughly in 4 BC, meaning that somewhere in the early 30s was when he was crucified and then, of course, resurrected. So we get the Apostle Paul writing his earliest writings, his letters, which are the earliest kind of Christian literature that we now have. So 1st and 2nd Thessalonians and Galatians was probably written somewhere in the late 40s or early 50s. And then the Gospel of Mark was probably written sometime in the 60s. So in the mid 60s, not the mid 1960s, but in the mid 60s, just regular 60, no prefix there. In the mid 60s, there was a war that took place between the Jews and the Romans. The Jews revolted, they wanted their independence, and the war lasted for 4 years, and the Jews lost. The Romans won, and the Romans sent their military in, and they ended up burning Jerusalem to the ground and destroying the temple. So the Jews have only ever had 2 temples. They've had a tabernacle for a while, but there was a temple that Solomon built, and in a very creative fashion, scholars refer to it as Solomon's temple, or sometimes the first temple. It was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. And then there was a second temple built by Zerubbabel, and we call it the second temple. Yeah, so maybe we're not the most creative people in the world, but that second temple would last until the Romans destroyed it in 70 AD. And of course, Jesus would have prophesied the destruction of the temple. He says the temple is going to be destroyed, and he says it'll happen before this generation passes away. And sure enough, before the people he was talking to, most of them, before they had passed away, the temple had been destroyed. And the temple is still destroyed, right? There's only been 2 Jewish temples. We'll go to the Temple Mount, where the temple used to be. You know, we'll pray at the Western Wall, which is a part of the temple platform that used to hold it up. But the Jews have only ever had 2 temples, and the last one was destroyed in the first Jewish war against the Romans. The last few folks, the resistance, the rebels, sounds like I'm talking about Star Wars, doesn't it? So when the empire came to Jerusalem, and Darth Vader, AKA the Roman general, destroyed it, the last few folks retreated, and they came here to Masada. And Masada was an incredible place for them to stay because it was so secure. So in this next picture, and I know, sorry, Mikhail, you just had changed the thing. So from the top of Masada, if you look down, you'll see this, what looks like kind of a big square. That's the Roman camp. So there's like a handful of Roman camps, the remains of which are still around Masada. So you can see where the Romans were and their encampments that existed around. So they came down to Masada. And the problem is, going up Masada, the only way to get there was a very narrow path on the southern part of the mountain. And you could maybe at best go 2 by 2. Like you wouldn't want to go 3 by 3 because the third person might get knocked off and go, like Wile E. Coyote or something, down the canyon. And I realize I'm dating myself a little bit with the Wile E. Coyote comment. Joseph Lee, do you know who Wile E. Coyote is in the Roadrunner?
I'm just old enough to remember them. Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
you wouldn't want to go up more than 2 by 2, but here's the issue. It doesn't matter how big and powerful your army is. If you can only advance 2 by 2 and you're having to go uphill, those who are already uphill looking down at you can kill you 2 by 2. It was incredibly good. And there were these huge cisterns. We'll take a look at some of them here in a minute. So they could have plenty of water, even though it only rained a few months a year. They had enough natural water. They could have kept flocks up there. They had everything they needed, and they could have kind of stayed there indefinitely. So the Romans didn't have a lot of options. So what they did was they built a ramp, and you can see the ramp here. That's what it looks like today, 2,000 years later. So the Romans were themselves pretty good builders. And so on the north side, they just basically built a ramp so they could go up the ramp and knock down the wall. So this is the way it happened. As they went to build the ramp, as you might imagine, once the ramp gets high enough, the Jews who were in Masada, which included both men and women and families, they had all kind of retreated there, as well as some of the community from Qumran. So some Essenes and Pharisees who, for the most part, would have been nonviolent, had thought this was the great eschatological battle against evil. And so they had taken up arms. So they'd all retreated there. And as the ramp got high enough, they could, again, from where they were, kill the Romans who were building the ramp. But Roman ingenuity is pretty remarkable. So they just enslaved Jews from surrounding villages and forced them to build the ramp. And the zealots, the Sicarii who were occupying Masada, were unwilling to kill their fellow Jews. And so the ramp got built. And once the ramp was built, the Romans rolled a battering ram up the ramp and knocked the wall down. And when they did, very unfortunately, they found out that all the Jews were dead. So they had died by kind of a form of group suicide. So they hadn't died exactly by suicide. What they did was they met in the synagogue, and the men drew names, like they wrote their name down on a shard of pottery, and it got put in a pot, and they drew it out. And if your name was drawn, 12 of them had agreed that they would kill everyone else in the middle of the night. And then of the 12, they drew names again, and one of them would kill the other 11. And then just the last person would die by suicide. Like that was the plan. We know this because there were 2 women and 5 children who hid themselves and didn't die. And their story was then shared. And the kind of the most reliable account of what happened in Masada is in Josephus, the Jewish historian's book called The Jewish Wars. So Josephus has 2 major works: Jewish Antiquities, Jewish Histories, and then Jewish Wars. And it's in Jewish Wars that we get this story. Almost exclusively, that's where we hear it from. There's a little bit in Roman history that we also find out about Masada, but it's mostly from Josephus. So you can walk up that ramp, but we're not going to be coming in from that side. That's if you're driving in from the desert. We're going to be coming in from the Dead Sea. So this is just another picture. I just really liked it of from a little further away. So you can kind of see the high plateau and how impossible it would have been to just kind of scale the side. But you can see what's left after all these years with a lot of erosion, still a pretty substantial, like the ramp has not been reconstructed in any way. That still is what's left of the Roman ramp that was built all those years ago. So all of that top part is Masada, although just the part to our left, which was kind of, again, the northeast bit, was where Herod's palace was. This is a depiction of the synagogue. So the synagogue wouldn't have been open, it would have been enclosed. But it has been somewhat reconstructed, like they know that the synagogue was here. And so they built the walls up just a little higher, and the columns that are there, they just kind of placed those there to give you a feel of what it would have looked like. And so the way a Jewish synagogue would work is they would sit in the round, not unlike what we do here at Oasis, if we had another group of chairs in the back here. In that, what looks like a little room in the back there, today, there is a rabbi, like 24/7. A rabbi will sit in there copying scripture. It's one of the practices that the Israelis do, is to have a rabbi there always copying the Hebrew scriptures. So they're not copying the New Testament, just what we would call the Old Testament. But we realize they don't call it the Old Testament. They just call it the scriptures. And they're copying it in Hebrew. So last time I was there, the rabbi wrote on a little card, Robbie and Angela, and put a little heart on it. And I thought, oh, that's sweet. And I carry it with me. It's in my book bag. I kind of always have it on me. But that's an interesting piece. It is here at the synagogue that we found, or that archaeologists found the shards with people's names on it. So not only did we know about that event from Josephus, they also found kind of archaeological evidence that corroborated it. Have a hard time saying that word. So we'll go there for a bit. This is part of the path that goes up the ramp. Again, if we were coming in from the desert, we would come in on that side and kind of take the stairs up, which is not a horrible walk. It's something that is doable. But again, we're not coming in from that side. Yeah? Oh, Angela says the walk is terrible. I think the other side is a terrible walk. Like like this is maybe a 10-minute walk. The other one's 30 minutes. This one is, I think, a relatively gentle grade, where the other one's like a hike. That's my impression. She remembers differently, apparently. This is how we'll get up there. So there's a very large cable car. It's air conditioned, and it starts on the side that we will drive in, where there's a welcome center and like a restaurant and a bookstore, and we might even grab lunch there. And then we'll get our tickets from our tour guide, and we'll get on here, and it takes about, I don't know, 2 minutes to just ride up to the top. So that's the kind of trip we're taking. And we're more riders than we are walkers. I say that, but then, we're going to get in 7,000 to 10,000 steps a day, and you're going to think, man, that's a lot of walking. It could be worse. How about that? This is one of the cisterns that's up there. So they would hewn out, this is kind of a quintessential way of living out in the desert. They would hewn out these true cisterns that could hold the water. And then when it would rain, right, it would just kind of hold it up. I think I have another one here as well. Yeah, there it is. You can kind of see kind of way down in there, a person standing. So just imagine how much water that could hold. So plenty enough to sustain a couple of hundred people probably, and their flocks, and irrigate their fields, not fields, but gardens. So it's pretty remarkable place. This is a close-up of the kind of the north end. It's kind of tiered. And so what Herod did with his palace is he built multiple buildings on these different tiered levels. Just really kind of remarkable, both in terms of the architectural accomplishment and in terms of the sheer beauty. Like to be there and to look out over the desert, to look out over the Dead Sea, to kind of look over into what at his time would have been Perea. At our time, it'd be modern day Jordan. It is is really, really fascinating. And so there have been one place for entertainment, there've been one place for food, there've been one place for like where you would sleep, right? And then if you moved on to the top level, that would have been like the public gathering for him to kind of conduct business from there. This is inside the bathhouse at Masada. And so a Roman bath, like a Turkish bath, it's made up of three, or Greek bath, it's made up of three main areas: a caldarium, it sounds hot, right? Like a cauldron, a frigidarium, and that's exactly what it sounds like. And I don't know, a mediocredarium. I might have made that word up. So there's a hot one, there's a cold one, and then there's a lukewarm one. And you can kind of move from bath to bath to bath. And it was a process that they would do. They would kind of relax their muscles. I mean, it's really quite nice to experience it. And so here you can kind of make out. So there is a walkway, which we will walk on there, that's been built over what you can see. So what they would do is they would put all those little columns that you can see on the floor, and then they would put a subflooring over them of tile, like stone tile. And so now we have kind of two floorings, a lower floor that you're not seeing once it's all tiled, and then the floor that you would walk on. Then they would take stones and put them in the fire. And then once they got hot, they would move them out of the fire and put them in the subfloor. And then they would flood the subfloor. So the water would hit the hot stones, creating steam. And then basically through what kind of pottery pipes that would line the walls on the side with some holes in them, the steam would come from the subfloor up the pipes and then into the room. And the walls would have been finished with ceramic tile. So they would have a real sheen on them, which would then create condensation, which I think is remarkable, because I come from the mountains, and all of my grandparents none of my grandparents when they were young had running water in their house. In fact, I think my father was about 7 or 8 when his parents got a working bathroom indoors. It's like my dad grew up going outdoors to go to the bathroom. In fact, his bedroom in the house that I grew up visiting, like when I visited my grandmother, his bedroom, what was his bedroom growing up, was now the bathroom. He was the youngest, and so he got the smallest room. But I was just, it wasn't that long ago, right? Yeah.
Hey, I was just gonna ask you, over in the left corner there, is that part of the original paint? Is that what, or is that the tiles where the steam would come up?
So I don't know how original it is, but what they have done, I mean, there are some parts of like the frescoes and the mosaics that are still, that has still been found. Some of that is reconstructed. I have a close-up of that.
Okay.
So there you can see, right? And so you can see the plaster, you can see the subflooring. I'm still amazed at the quality of the technology. Now, granted, plumbing works today like it did 2,000 years ago. It's gravity. Water moves downhill. And if you know the grade and you have a closed system, that's how it works. So that there's no electricity involved in plumbing. Plumbing is all just levers and gravity and water, which still amazes me that it is as efficient as it is. But here's to the Romans and what they were able to figure out, and Herod, who had been educated in Rome, and what he was able to accomplish, not just in terms of public display of technology and wealth, but in private display of technology and wealth. It really is. I'm just amazed by it personally. All right. Shifting now a bit, and maybe, well, let me come back. One of the places that I've rarely been able to go to for a variety of reasons over the years either the trip was so short we couldn't quite fit it in, or it was a little adventurous, so we weren't sure everybody wanted to do it. I always went when I had a group of students and I had them there for over a month, then you can kind of do whatever you want to do. So there's a story in the Old Testament when the Assyrians came south, not the first Assyrian, and I would quiz you all because I'd be interested to know who can remember their Assyrian king names. So not Shalmaneser III, and not Tiglath-Pileser, and not Shalmaneser V, but the next one. That's right, Sennacherib. So when Sennacherib came, so you remember Shalmaneser and Tiglath-Pileser were responsible for destroying the northern kingdom. But Sennacherib, a later Assyrian king, would come and kind of look to expand his kingdom. So when he's coming through what had been the northern kingdom is now just an extension of Assyria. He gets to Jerusalem and Hezekiah is the king. Hezekiah is the king of Jerusalem at the time. And it's a walled city, but it's not going to be able to withstand most likely the Assyrian army. So there's multiple accounts of this. For the longest time, this was the oldest, what I'm getting ready to mention, it was the oldest non-biblical piece of historical artifact that corroborated ancient Israelite history. So there is a relief, it's like a column that was found in Nineveh and written on it in cuneiform, which is basically just lines with triangles stuck on different parts of the lines. It's a very odd alphabet. It told the story of Sennacherib going to Jerusalem, and it's a short line, but it says that Sennacherib had Hezekiah pinned in Jerusalem like a bird pinned in a cage. So that's the Assyrian telling of the story. And that particular pillar is not in Iraq, like you might think it would be, since it's from Nineveh. It is, you're right, in London, where everything is, because the Brits stole everything when they owned the world. So if you go to the British Museum one day in London, which you should if you ever get a chance, a few things that you want to see. One is the Rosetta Stone. It's the stone by which scholars were able to crack Egyptian hieroglyphics. It's in there, and it's just sitting out there, like in the hallway. Like I hate to admit this, you guys forgive me. I was real impressed by the quality of this replica of the Rosetta Stone that they had. And I'm like rubbing it. And then I realized somebody said, don't do that. And I'm like, okay. And then I realized it wasn't a replica of the Rosetta Stone. It was the Rosetta Stone. And all I could think of, they should put up some of those velvet ropes or something to keep, idiots like me from touching things like that. Like if that had been in the Smithsonian, it would have been behind bulletproof glass. But anyway, they have the Rosetta Stone. We're going to talk in a minute about some other things that they have. They have the pillar from Nineveh of Sennacherib. They have Handel's Messiah with his handwritten notes in the margins. Yeah, they got it all. All right. Back to Hezekiah's tunnel. So if you read the same story in Kings, and you can also obviously reread it in Chronicles, that story goes like this, that Hezekiah called the people off of the walls because he didn't want them listening to the threats of the Assyrians. And he calls them into the temple and he says, look, we're going to turn our face to God and pray that we are delivered. And he spoke to them in ways that hopefully that would kind of build their faith. And then, according to scripture, the angel of the Lord came that night and some 120,000 Assyrians died. And so the army went home. So that's a very different story than what we find in Sennacherib's pillar. But in any case, the reason Hezekiah was able to withstand the assault of the Assyrian army is because not only did they have a nicely walled city, but they had built a tunnel. Jerusalem was pretty small at the time. And like when last time when we were looking at the Temple Mount, had the big Dome of the Rock, and then slightly south of it was the Mosque Alaska, a small mosque. Then if you're coming south of that, there's a little hill, and that little hill is called the City of David. When David was there, that's all Jerusalem was. It didn't go up to the top of the hill, it was just that small bit. By the time of Hezekiah, it was larger than that, but still at that location, they had built a tunnel. They had hewn it through the rock, and it went down to a natural spring. And so they did not have to go outside of the city walls to access fresh water. And for those of you who want to, we're going to walk through Hezekiah's tunnel. Now, Angela and I seem to remember it differently. It is quite narrow. Like, I'm a little broad, so there are times where I have to turn sideways to get through. It's like that small. Like if I try to walk straight, my shoulders hit. So I'm like squeezing like this. I thought the water was like, knee deep. Angela, what do you remember? Yeah, but you're a lot smaller than I am. Under her knees, she says. So maybe she says like more of in your calf level, not knee level. All right. It's a cool experience to do. It's very adventurous. You're certainly not required to do it. At the location where you enter, oh, look, there's a picture.
Do we need to
Who is
bring
that?
boots for that?
I have a pair of water shoes, like I would wear to the water park.
Okay.
I mean, you could just wear tennis shoes, but then your tennis shoes are wet. You'd want to change socks or something.
Can you show the picture again, Angela?
Ange, can you hold that picture up? Hold it a little closer. Who is that? Oh, we don't know who that is. There it is. It does look more ankle deep there. And he has his hands on the wall. So it's not like super tight.
Hands were wet though,
Mhm.
right there.
That's the widest part of the tunnel. No, I'm just kidding. There is a great little shop and another cafe kind of up at the entrance. So if you don't want to walk down through the tunnel, that's cool. I would just do a little shopping and get a coffee. I do have this one picture I love in my office. If anybody's ever around, I'll come in and I'll show you that I bought there. It's on a piece of parchment. Shows Jerusalem as the center, and it shows the world as kind of like a flower. And there's one petal that's for Europe, one petal's for Africa, one petal's for Asia, and Jerusalem's in the middle. It's a pretty famous German artist, but I bought it there. All right, so that's exciting. We haven't done that very often. When I first went in 1991, I was only 19, and I was definitely going to do it. But the PLO, remember that group, the Palestinian Liberation Organization? They were occupying it, and it wasn't a point at which, anyway, I didn't get to go. And I love Palestinians, not to say anything about them, but that wasn't the time to mingle. All right. Okay. Next picture here. So this, what looks like a little squared city, is St. Catherine's Monastery. It is the oldest continual monastery on planet Earth. And the mountain behind it is Mount Sinai. So this has gone from Israel into the Sinai, which is Egypt. And one interesting story about St. Catherine's here. There was a British scholar and archaeologist, New Testament scholar, and he was traveling through Egypt, and he was visiting St. Catherine's, and his name was Tischendorf. And according to Tischendorf, he found in kind of scraps of old parchment, what he realized was parts of scripture. And so he started to collect it all. And then he smuggled it out because he said that they were going to burn it. And it became the codex that we now have called Sinaiticus. Yeah, it is the oldest full copy of scripture that we have. And I say we have it, it's in the British Museum. It's there with Handel's Messiah, the Rosetta Stone, and the Sennacherib's pillar from Nineveh. I actually don't have anything against the Brits. It sounds like I do maybe, just because they stole everything. But so the Sinaiticus, it's all in Greek. It's written on parchment, which is a form of writing material that's made from animal skin. So it's like a really thin piece of leather. So it's very, very durable. It's quite large. It has the look of what I would call kind of like your coffee table Bibles, like your big family Bibles. But because the pages are kind of thick, it's a fairly thick piece. It runs from Genesis to Revelation. It is part of an ancient kind of Greek Orthodox tradition. So it has more books in it than our contemporary Protestant Bibles would have. So it has 151 Psalms, has one extra Psalm. It has some additions to Daniel, the prayer of the three Hebrew boys like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There's a prayer that was part of the Greek version of Daniel that's included. A couple of other stories about Daniel, whole separate books of Susanna, and there's a story where Daniel kills a dragon. But then it has 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Maccabees, which is Jewish history. Has Judith and Tobit, which is a really fascinating story. Yeah, the whole the Catholic Apocrypha is contained in it. So all in all, I think it has 76 books as opposed to our 66. And it is, again, we have other ones that are also found in the neighborhood, so to speak. One called Alexandrinus, you might guess that was found in Alexandria. One called Vaticanus, you might guess it's kept in the Vatican. There's one called Washingtonius. It's kept in the Smithsonian. It's a pretty old one. It's the oldest one that's owned by the Americans. But yeah, so Sinaiticus is a really, really important text. Again, if you're at the British Museum ever, it is in a glass box, which is good, so people don't just touch it. And in the next glass box next to it is Alexandrinus. So the two oldest, most reliable texts are kind of side by side there. So, but we are going to St. Catherine's where it was found. It's a beautiful monastery. That's one of my kind of bucket list things I want to do in my life and I've never done. So this will be my first time to St. Catherine's. And then we'll hike Mount Sinai, which is behind it there. So definitely have your walking shoes on that day. This is a picture from inside the compound there, inside St. Catherine's. You see the bell tower and you can kind of see the mountain in the distance. Pretty fascinating. Pretty great place to go. Oh, this is a picture of Sinaiticus. So you can see each page has 4 columns. And at that time, they didn't use lowercase letters. They only used uppercase letters. They also didn't use any punctuation or spaces between the words, which makes it very difficult to read, by the way. So, I mean, I consider myself a relatively good Greek scholar, but this is an easy reading, Sinaiticus. So this is kind of an overview map of kind of where we'll be. I think this will show up. Oop. So obviously you can make out Israel there, Jerusalem with the star, Jordan, Syria. So at the top of Israel there, that little blue water is the Sea of Galilee, and then the water coming down is the Jordan River, and it empties into the Dead Sea. And then if you follow Israel down the white bit, it kind of dead ends into Elat, which is also part of the Red Sea. We're not actually going there, but it's a real vacation destination. Where we will be going is over here in the Sinai, all the way down to the very point of it. Yeah, could. All right. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, thanks, Mikkel. So yeah, so we're going to go right there. Up here is Mount Sinai and St. Catherine's, but we'll spend the night down here. We'll go there, and then we'll come over to Cairo. Thanks. Thanks, buddy. So yeah, I don't know about the rest of you, but getting to see the pyramids has to be kind of a highlight of the trip. I mean, listen, here's one way to think about it. So some 300 years before Jesus was born, one of the things the Greeks like to do is to go on vacation to a really ancient place and see ancient human history. And they would come to see these pyramids. So 300 years before Jesus was born, people who had saved up and had some resources would go and visit the pyramids. So that's pretty amazing to me. And we're going to get to go and see the pyramids. Now, how were the pyramids built? As you all know from watching the History Channel at night, they were built by the aliens. Just kidding. They were built by the Egyptians. That's who they're built by. And in particular, they were built by slave labor. So it is Black History Month, and it might be good for us to note that a lot of our municipality buildings and government buildings were also built by slave labor that we go visit, like when we go to DC or what have you. But yeah, that's, if you have enough money and you have enough slaves, you can do a lot of things. And the Egyptians had both. They had money and they had slaves, and so they built the pyramids. Yeah, so that's going to be great. The Sphinx, also something to look forward to get to see. The Sphinx is not actually that close to that pyramid. This is a little bit of an optical illusion. The pyramid's just so big, but we will see the Sphinx. In fact, our hotel in Cairo will be able to see, because it's not on, our hotel's not on the Nile, it's inland a bit, but we will be able to see the pyramids from the hotel, which I think is pretty cool. So grab a cup of coffee and go out and see them. Oh, yeah. So I included this picture because typically when I see pictures of the pyramids, it's like a drone view and they're looking out toward the desert, which makes it look like the pyramids are like somewhere in the middle of the Sahara. Unlike, I don't know if any of you watched these, but the new Transformer movies, the one with Shia LaBeouf, in the first one, he starts in Jordan at Petra, where the Mosers and I were like 3 years ago. And then in about 5 minutes, he runs over to Giza, to the pyramids, which of course we realized that's not a 5-minute run. That's, it's like a 10-hour drive. But anyway, they don't need to be historically or geographically accurate in a movie where robots turn into automobiles, because that's also not historically accurate. But yeah, so what I like about this picture is you can see how close the pyramids are to the city of Cairo. It's just right there. So there's the Nile. I mean, Cairo kind of sits on both sides of the Nile. And then there are the pyramids, just super close by. This is another picture of Cairo. It's a major city. The Nile itself will be kind of a life experience, really. One of the major rivers of the world, producing some of the earliest of kind of human civilization, kind of moving from hunters and gatherers to planters and becoming stationary and not just transient. I mean, you've heard of that argument before, right? There's those who keep herds and those who plant gardens. Some sacrifice the animal and some sacrifice the fruits and vegetables. And there's a conflict between them. You know that story? Cain and Abel, right? It's as old as human history, right? The conflict between those two things. But yeah, here's Cairo. We'll fly home. Those of us who are going to Egypt, will fly home from Cairo, and that will wrap up the trip. Questions? Yeah, so there's a question here in the house about riding camels in Egypt. We will have some opportunities for camel rides. You'll be surprised how often we'll have opportunities for camel rides. Like you stop at a gas station for us to fill up, and then there's like a camel over there. And inevitably somebody gets on a camel for, a couple of dollars. And it's $2 to get on the camel. It's $20 to get off. No, just kidding. But they do play that joke, right? And so like, we're not going to take a caravan somewhere. Like, we're not all getting on camels at the same time and going from location A to location B. But there will be, we'll see a good number of them, certainly in Israel, but in Egypt as well. But it's not, we won't all get on them at the same time. Yes, Angela said, we will make sure that you have an opportunity to ride a camel. If you've never ridden a camel, it's kind of like riding a horse, really. I think, which I don't like riding horses. I think it's incredibly uncomfortable. I don't know why anybody would ever get on a horse. I do think a camel might be a little less comfortable. A horse is pretty high, a camel is higher. And if you're sitting on the camel, if it's on its knees, as it goes to stand up, at first, you think you're going to be thrown off forward, because you're leaning very far. I mean, there's something to hold on to. Obviously, people don't fall off typically. And then as they go to stand up, it feels like you're going to fall off backwards. And then it stands up and you're sitting up there. One of our pilgrims from last time, an 85-year-old woman, a good friend of our family, rode a camel, to which I guess Angela's saying I shouldn't make it sound like it's some great life accomplishment or difficult. Yeah, it's worth doing. Like, had I not done it before, I would definitely do it. I probably won't do it again because I didn't find it comfortable. But if I had not done it, I would do it, because you want to say, hey, I rode a camel in the Middle East. There you go. What else? Angela, you think something? No? All right. Well, everybody stay healthy. Particularly the closer we get, all the more reason to stay away from people and not get the COVID. Oh yeah, if you haven't already received your booster shot for COVID, you need to get it by next Wednesday. That is a requirement it's an Israeli requirement, like Israel's requiring it for entry into the country. That's not an Oasis requirement. It's not a educational opportunities, which is obviously the name of our tour company requirement. It's an Israeli national requirement. So.
And everyone needs to email their copy of the passport and vaccine passport.
To whom?
To EO, and I can send an email.
All right, Angela's going to send an email with this information, but you have to send via email a copy of your passport and a copy of your vaccine information to EO. So what's nice about this is why you use a tour company, is that you're not relying just on the travel expertise of Angela and I, but educational opportunities travels all over the world. They travel especially to Israel, and they have a lot of employees that are full-time in Israel. They actually own property in Israel. They're constantly dealing with the Israeli government. So we're not just some small church from Central Florida who's trying to get there on our own. We're traveling with one of the larger tour companies that travel in that part of the world. And so that's to our advantage. All right, anything else?
Angela, do we have specific dates, particularly between Israel and Egypt, so we can inform our credit card company where we're going to be so they don't reject our transactions?
I think you could just give them the date from the 4th to the 18th. Tell them what countries you're going to be in.
4 to
You
the
should do that.
18th and the countries.
Yeah, and
Okay. Okay. And what
Um,
about stopovers? I think I heard Frankfurt.
well, it was,
No,
but
it's not now, and
not now. So
we don't really know.
Yeah, so within a couple weeks before our trip, they'll purchase the tickets.
Okay.
And so
Alright.
you'll need to contact any credit card, your bank to tell them, and
Mhm.
also your cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
So different cell phone carriers have different plans. So I think ours was like, I haven't called this time, but $10 for 24 hours. So we will have internet on the bus. So you
Like
may or may
Wi-Fi.
not need your phone like all the time,
And in the hotels, right?
and in the hotels. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so Wi-Fi on the bus and in the hotels. So you can, I'm not sure how Androids work, but I know you can send iMessage and FaceTime through the Wi-Fi. While we don't know for sure the particular flight tonight, given that it looks like we're not flying directly out of Orlando into like Germany and then Tel Aviv, we're flying out of Orlando into New York, there's a good chance then that flight will be direct from New York, to Tel Aviv.
That's probably the flight, is what they said, is that we'll go through New York.
That's the way we came back last time.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
and
because we
that-
have some people not traveling from Orlando, we'll meet in New York.
and that flight out of New York is direct to Tel Aviv.
That will be direct to Tel Aviv.
like
And it will be
Lebanon.
about the same time, kind of late afternoon on the 4th.
That's a good question. So we had a question here, and I think it would be ideal if all of those of us who will be in Lakeland before we depart travel together to the Orlando airport. We can get somebody from the church here maybe to drive either the church bus or something and kind of get us all there at the same time. That way we're not having to deal with parking our cars or finding other transportation. That's something we can do, right, Ange? Yeah. So if you're coming with us from Lakeland, then we'll make arrangements to get everybody from the church to the airport. And then that'll solve some logistic challenges.
If we were to do that, because I wondered so Charles and I will come back earlier than the Egypt trip. What does that do getting back home?
Ange?
Well, just-
Yeah, let me see what we could do as far as getting someone to get us there and see if someone can pick you up. Carol, Mikkel, and Joseph are all coming back from
Okay.
Israel. So you won't be alone.
Okay.
Yeah. So is Joseph, are you coming back to Lakeland?
So part of my plan, part of my plan was to actually travel down to Lakeland a day or two beforehand,
Yeah.
grab a place to stay, and then just go with you guys to the airport.
Okay.
I can edit that. I just haven't gotten any details of that together just yet.
All right. Well, you
So
don't need to.
sorry.
We would love to have you there. But to Kathy, to Angela's point, Carol and Mikkel are coming back after the Israel, and they live here in Lakeland. So there'll be at least 4 of you, maybe a 5th one.
Okay, thank you. And a typical day, like the day that we arrive with all the travel, how much is happening that day when we get in country?
Not very much. So what we'll do once we arrive, it'll be fairly late. We'll have to get COVID tested. And then there's a little bit of a drive from Tel Aviv up to our hotel in Galilee. And then we'll probably just eat dinner and go to bed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then days after that, is it like an 8:30 to 8 p.m. kind of day?
Yeah, mostly. There are some days that we get up a little earlier. They're early morning things to do. So sometimes, breakfast might be at 7 or 7:30 because we want to get on the road to see something. But typically the evenings are done by about 4:30 or 5.
Okay.
And then, dinner at the hotel, and then kind of the evening is your own to re-explore.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Robbie.
Thanks,
and
Robert.
Angela.
Angela.
Bye, Robbie.
Good night.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank y'all.
See that. Oh.
See you later.